Halo has had a profound impact on the games industry as a whole, and no more so than the 3D shooter genre, of which it was a formative member in the face of the genre for years to come. But has it made the same rippling waves in representation as it has in shooter mechanics? That is the question I want to explore in this video. Welcome, I'm your host Tony, and yes, I know this cinematic is from Halo Reach, but come on, those cinematics are unbeatable. In this video, I want to focus primarily on gender and ethnicity, specifically in the entry title to the Halo series, Halo Combat Evolved. Before I get started, I want to state that since most of this essay will address representation of other genders and ethnicities, my perspective should be taken with a grain of salt. I will do my best to remain objective, but bias in any media is inevitable. Thank you. Halo takes place in the distant future, when humanity has colonized the galaxy after achieving slip space technology, which allows them to travel what would be faster than light by cheating through an extra dimension known as slip space. At this point, we would imagine humanity to have progressed to the point of biological limitations being obsolete. Indeed, we see the product of genetic engineering in our primary protagonist, Master Chief, whereby a human is able to fight on par with large reptilian humanoids. Through elaboration by the creators in other media, we have even seen that the common Marines use cybernetic enhancements to assist them in combat. This allows them to hold their own somewhat against the Covenant. Though overwhelmed by sheer numbers and superior technology, biology does not seem to be a substantial issue. Since humanity is on the brink of extinction after the decimation of their non-Earthen colonies, the logical conclusion would be to use all possible manpower they can muster in the form of every able-bodied human. Despite this, there appear to be no female or other gendered ground troops present in combat on the massive mega-carrier Pillar of Autumn. In fact, there are only 2 female characters in the entire game, Cortana and the Pelican pilot named Foehammer. Ideally, a game will initially focus on a core audience and then branch out and expand the audience once it has established a foothold, while maintaining as much of the original audience as possible. This tends to be how games garner the largest following. To that end, I would argue that Bungie did this exceptionally well, especially moving to Reach and then onto the later Destiny series. However, the first installment of the Halo series fails in 2 key areas: race and gender diversity. On a surface level, the game provides a somewhat diverse cast of characters. However, on deeper examination, most of that diversity is fitting stereotypes or relegated to secondary roles. Right off the bat, the first 2 characters introduced are Commander Keyes, the classic strongman off-the-cuff general archetype, and Cortana, an advanced AI who fits both the smart guy trope and to some degree the damsel in distress trope. She is dependent on the male characters for protection, relying on Master Chief to escape the grasp of the Covenant. She functions as more of a supporting role and appears only when Chief needs her to, or to serve as a plot driver. While this isn't an overly glaring issue, it does fall well short of one of the game's primary inspirations, Ridley Scott's Alien. All characters in this film and novel, from which it was written, were in fact written to be gender neutral, and the movie features 2 female protagonists, one being the central protagonist, Ridley. While it can be overlooked that the protagonist's gender doesn't particularly play a factor, it is worth noting the women in Alien are not relegated to combat roles, as in Halo. I have to say, in terms of gender representation, the original game seems to do fairly poorly, especially considering it is in the age where technology has advanced, where biology no longer plays a significant factor in combat, which is often the excuse for relegating female-identifying persons to non-combat roles in modern times. It is hard to ignore the unintentional nods the game is making towards women's place in combat, at least in video games. Indeed, as a whole, it seems to say this game is not for women. I will add, a lot of this changes in later games, namely Reach with the addition of another female protagonist and an androgynous/unspecified player protagonist. But Halo Combat Evolved does appear to uphold ultra-masculine stereotypes. In the opening cutscene, the first black character is introduced, Sergeant Avery Johnson. From what I can tell, his character is very positively portrayed as a strong black man in a position of power. In addition to this, the engineers who awaken Master Chief appear to be mixed race. Even the main protagonist is intentionally left ambiguous under his armor, though he is voiced by a white man. Chief does serve his purpose as being a figure that most everyone could look up to, although primarily young men who want a masculine role model. Overall, the game does pretty well in regards to race representation, though it is quite hard to tell what race they are based on voice and 2001 graphics alone. Aside from the opening cinematic characters, namely Sergeant Avery Johnson, the Pelican pilot appears to be the only other person of color. Though no visual confirmation of that occurs, her voice actor is indeed a woman of color. Just to peek at the raw numbers of diversity on the cast, I did a quick Google search for the voice acting credits, credit to IMDb, which told me the cast consists of 2 women, Cortana and Pilot Fohammer, and 14 men, of which 11 were white, 2 were black, 1 Latino, 1 was mixed, and 1 was left unspecified. I believe the game primarily reflects the gaming culture at the time, that being mostly white, middle-aged males from middle-class backgrounds, who dominated the RPG and FPS genres at the time. In shooter games specifically, which were designed to reinforce the American military's post-World War II machismo tropes, we definitely see that influence prevailing. Strong, masculine role models are prevalent, with intelligent women to keep them in check, yet still requiring their protection and being relegated to the sidelines, despite technology making biological differences obsolete. Halo seems to focus on redefining gameplay aspects, rather than taking a strong social stance, which is fine, but by our metrics of today's standards, it does fall well short of being a revolutionary game in the social sense, or representative of the greater gamer culture we now have. Although Halo Combat Evolved did make great strides and become the gold standard for shooter games for years to come, it is problematic when it comes to representation and role models for minorities. This has been Tony, signing off.